He was the kind of man people admired: sharp suit, sharper mind, and a bank account that seemed untouchable. A man who thought love was a distraction, and sacrifice was weakness. Years ago, when she stood by his side, begging him to choose their future over his empire, he turned away. "Business first," he said. And in that moment, he didn't just lose her, he lost everything that mattered. 4 years passed. He built skyscrapers, closed billion-dollar deals, and ruled boardrooms with an iron will. But all the money in the world couldn't silence the emptiness he felt. Then, one evening, at a crowded event, he saw her again. She wasn't alone. Holding the hands of 2 little boys with his piercing blue eyes, she walked past him, and in that instant, the unshakable CEO realized he hadn't just lost her. He had lost a family. The city skyline glowed like fire that night, 1,000 lights reflecting off the glass towers he had built with nothing but ambition, sleepless nights, and an iron will. Alexander, Knight, 35 years old, billionaire CEO, and the kind of man whose very presence made investors lean forward and rivals tremble. People called him ruthless, some called him brilliant, but everyone agreed on one thing: Alexander always chose business first. And that was exactly what destroyed the one thing he could never replace. 4 years earlier, Alexander wasn't just a businessman, he was a man in love. Her name was Isabella Hart, a woman whose laughter could silence his restless mind, and whose touch reminded him that beneath all the cold steel and numbers, he was human. She didn't care about his empire, his bank account, or the headlines that hailed him as the youngest CEO to dominate the industry. She cared about him, the man behind the suit. But Alexander never knew how to slow down. Their evenings were filled with half conversations, interrupted dinners, and the endless buzzing of his phone. Isabella would wait by candlelight, the food growing cold, only to hear him whisper, "I'm sorry, love. Just one more deal. Just one more call." For a while, she believed him. She told herself it was temporary, that one day he would step away from the chaos and choose her. But as months bled into years, she realized she wasn't just competing with his business, she was losing. The breaking point came on a rainy evening in November. Isabella stood in his office, the storm outside raging like the storm inside her heart. "Alex," she said softly, holding his hand, "I don't need the world. I just need you. Can't you see that?" He didn't even look up from the contracts spread across his desk. His pen kept moving, his jaw set like stone. "This merger will change everything, Isabella. Just give me time, please." Her eyes filled with tears. "Time? I've given you years. I don't want a CEO. I want the man I fell in love with. I want a family, Alex. I want us." That was the first time he looked at her, and for a split second, something in his chest cracked. He wanted to pull her close, to promise her that she was worth more than all of it. But the weight of his empire crushed the words before they could escape. Instead, he said the one sentence that would haunt him forever: "Business first. Everything else can wait." Isabella's heart broke in silence. She let go of his hand, her warmth leaving him colder than the marble floor beneath his feet. She turned, walked to the door, and for the first time, Alexander didn't chase after her. That night, as the storm raged outside, Isabella left his penthouse. She left the city. She left him. Alexander told himself he had made the right decision. The merger did change everything. His company doubled in value, his face graced the covers of business magazines, and the world called him unstoppable. But when he came home to an empty apartment, when he poured himself whiskey in silence, when the echo of her laughter refused to fade from his memory, he realized victory had never felt so hollow. Weeks turned into months. He thought she might call, she didn't. He thought he could drown himself in work. But every late night, when the city slept and the silence grew too loud, her voice whispered in his mind, "I want a family, Alex. I want us." He never admitted it, not even to himself. But the truth was simple: he had chosen wrong. And by the time he realized it, it was already too late. Because Isabella wasn't just gone. She had disappeared into a new life, carrying with her a secret that would one day bring Alexander Knight, the untouchable CEO, to his knees. The years that followed were Alexander Knight's greatest triumphs and his greatest losses. On the surface, he was unstoppable. Business magazines hailed him as the king of steel and glass. His empire stretched across continents, swallowing competitors and rewriting markets. Every boardroom he walked into bent to his vision. Every investor who shook his hand knew fortunes would rise under his leadership. He had everything he thought he wanted. Yet every night, when the cameras were gone and the crowds faded, Alexander returned to silence. The penthouse, though sprawling, felt like a mausoleum, every corner echoing with memories of Isabella. The couch where she once curled up reading, the kitchen where she tried to teach him how to cook, the balcony where she whispered dreams of a family, all of it haunted him. He never admitted it to anyone, but he had stopped going into the bedroom they once shared. He slept in the guest room now. Because the scent of her perfume lingered too long on the sheets, his colleagues didn't notice. They saw only the tailored suits, the fierce determination, the speeches that turned shareholders into believers. But his closest friend, Marcus's CFO since the beginning, saw through it. One late night, after another victory party, Marcus poured Alexander a drink and said quietly, "You've won everything except the one thing that mattered. Tell me, Alex, what's the point of an empire if there's no one to share it with?" Alexander tightened his jaw, refusing to answer. But Marcus's words burned like acid. The whispers began months later. Rumors, pieces of gossip. Alexander pretended not to hear but secretly clung to. Isabella hadn't disappeared completely, at least not from the world. A friend of a friend mentioned seeing her in a quiet seaside town. Another claimed she had been spotted with children. Children. The word pierced him like a blade. Alexander dismissed it at first. It couldn't be true. She had always dreamed of a family, yes, but with him. Not with someone else. The thought of Isabella in another man's arms, raising another man's children, left him restless. He buried himself deeper in his work, convincing himself that if she had moved on, then so should he. But he couldn't. Every time he saw parents holding their children, every time he overheard laughter in the park, every time he noticed a small boy tugging at his father's sleeve, a shadow passed over him. He imagined Isabella's smile, her soft voice, her hand guiding a little one forward. And he wondered, what if those children had his eyes? The guilt ate at him. He tried dating, again, models, socialites, women who admired his wealth and power, but none of them were Isabella. Their laughter sounded hollow, their touch empty. They didn't know him, not truly. They wanted the CEO, not the man. By the end of the third year, Alexander's empire had doubled again. He was invited to world forums, private jets waited at his command, and his name was whispered in elite circles as a legend in the making. Yet his eyes told another story. His board noticed the shadows beneath them. His assistant noticed the way he paused when he saw families in the lobby. Marcus noticed the bottles of whiskey emptying faster than before, and then fate intervened. A charity gala, one of the largest of the year. Alexander didn't want to attend. He never cared for small talk with society's elite, but his company was the headline sponsor, and his presence was required. So he wore his finest suit, forced his most charming smile, and entered the ballroom as the cameras flashed. He shook hands, posed for photos, listened to speeches about philanthropy and the future, yet he felt numb, as always, until the moment the crowd parted, until the moment he saw her. Isabella. The world seemed to stop. The chatter, the clinking glasses, the music, all of it faded. She stood at the far end of the room, radiant in a simple dress that made her look more graceful than any woman dripping in diamonds that night. Her hair framed her face in soft waves, her eyes still carrying that quiet strength he once loved. For a moment, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him, but then he saw the detail that stole the breath from his lungs. Two small boys stood beside her, twins, no older than 4. Their little hands clutched hers as they looked around curiously at the glittering room. Alexander's heart stopped, because when the boys turned their faces toward him, he saw it his own reflection staring back, the same piercing blue eyes, the same sharp jawline. His blood, his legacy, his children. The room spun, his empire, his power, his titles, none of it mattered anymore. In that instant, Alexander Knight, the man who had everything, realized the truth. He had walked away not just from Isabella, he had walked away from them. For the first time in his life, Alexander Knight felt powerless. The man who commanded boardrooms, who bent billionaires to his will, who built an empire brick by brick with nothing but determination, stood frozen, unable to take a single step toward the woman he once loved, Isabella, and the 2 boys whose faces mirrored his own. He could barely breathe, his throat tightened, his chest hammered like a war drum. "Those are my sons," his mind screamed. But his heart whispered something else. "You don't deserve them." Before he could move, Isabella turned, her eyes colliding with his across the crowded ballroom. For a second, the years melted away. It was as if they were back in his office on that stormy night, when she begged him to choose love over ambition. But the Isabella before him now wasn't the same woman who left him in tears. This Isabella was stronger. Her chin lifted with quiet pride, her eyes steady, her hand protectively holding her children close. She didn't flinch at his presence. She didn't run. She simply looked at him, and then looked away. The dismissal cut deeper than any blade. Alexander forced his legs to move, weaving through the crowd until he stood just a few feet away. His voice trembled when he spoke her name. Isabella. She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. The boys clung to her, wide-eyed as if sensing the tension. Alex. Her voice was calm, too calm. The storm she once carried for him was gone. It's been a long time, 4 years, he whispered, his gaze dropping to the children. And them. Her eyes hardened. They're mine. The word struck him like a thunderbolt. But Alexander refused to retreat. His voice cracked with desperation. They're ours, aren't they? Isabella didn't answer immediately. She studied him, as if weighing his soul. Finally, she said, yes. They're yours. But you don't get to claim them now, Alex. Not after everything. The guilt he had buried for years came crashing down. On him, his empire, his billions, his victories, none of it shielded him from the truth. He had abandoned not only her, but them, before they were even born. He took a step closer, his hands trembling. Isabella, I didn't know. If you had known. What? She snapped, her calm shattering. Would you have left your precious empire behind? Would you have traded boardrooms for bedtime stories? Would you have chosen us over your endless hunger for more? The words sliced through him. He opened his mouth, but no excuse came, because deep down, he knew the answer. He hadn't chosen her before. Why should she believe he would have chosen her then? The boys tugged at her dress, whispering, Mama. Isabella crouched down, cupping their faces gently. It's all right, my loves. Go sit with Aunt Claire for a moment. A family friend stepped forward, guiding the twins toward a nearby table. When Isabella rose again, her eyes were glistening. You don't get to walk back in and fix this with an apology, Alex. These boys, my boys, have lived without you, every day of their lives. They don't know you. And I won't let them be hurt by you the way I was. Alexander's chest constricted. He had faced hostile takeovers, courtroom battles, billion-dollar risks, but never had he been so terrified. Not of losing his empire, but of losing his family before he ever truly had them. I don't want to take them from you, he said, his voice breaking. I want a chance. To know them. To know you again. To make things right. Isabella's lips trembled. For years, she had dreamed of hearing those words, but the pain of his choice was carved deep in her heart. She had raised 2 boys alone, carried sleepless nights and endless sacrifices on her shoulders, while he ruled the world untouched. Why now? She whispered. Why only when you see them do you suddenly regret? He swallowed hard. Because I finally see what I've lost. And it's not my business, Isabella. It's not the empire. It's you. It's them. It's the life I was, too blind to choose. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She wanted to hate him. She wanted to walk away again. But when she looked at him broken, desperate, stripped of his armor, she saw the man she had once loved. The man who, beneath all the ambition, had always wanted a family too, but was too afraid to admit it. Silence stretched between them. The music swelled in the background, couples laughing, glasses clinking. The world continuing, as if their universe hadn't just collided. Finally, Isabella spoke. I won't promise you anything, Alex. If you want to be in their lives, you'll have to prove it. Not with money. Not with grand gestures. With time, with presence, with love. Alexander's heart surged with hope. He nodded, his voice steady despite the storm inside. Then I'll spend every day proving it. To them, to you, to myself. And for the first time in years, Isabella saw sincerity in his eyes, not the cold determination of a CEO, but the raw, trembling vulnerability of a man who had everything, and realized it meant nothing without family. She turned away, calling the twins back. As they ran into her arms, Alexander watched them, his sons, his blood, his chance at redemption. He didn't reach for them. Not yet. Instead, he stood quietly, knowing this was only the beginning. The empire he once built had been forged in ambition, but the life he now longed for would have to be built in love. And Alexander Knight, the man who once chose business over her, finally understood love was the only empire worth fighting for. Some choices can't be undone. Alexander Knight had everything: wealth, power, success, but none of it could replace the family he lost when he chose ambition over love. His story is a reminder that no amount of money can buy back time or heal the wounds of regret. In the end, it's not the skyscrapers or the headlines that matter, it's the people who stand beside us when the world fades. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories of love, loss, and redemption. Your support keeps these stories alive.